Welcome back, people on the internet. This is Life in Apparel, our show about classic, historical menswear, and everything related to that. I am your host, Keller. This is the other random guy, Max. And so basically today's episode is we're going to be jumping into the coat. And we're just going to dive in real deep on that, talk about its construction, some different varieties that you'll see in different coats, and we're going
a little more detail than we could get into last time.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to talk about the different contexts that these different coats kind of fit into. Mm-hmm. Before we do that, though, we had a question on the last episode very quickly, so we're going to answer that.
It was a question from Lori, and she was specifically asking about like a brown suit. Can that be considered something formal?
We have it, yeah.
So, can a brown suit be considered formal for business, like if you don't have a vest on? And that brings up a good point of just knowing the context of where you're going to be wearing it. Certain places, like here in Austin, are very much more casual, so that just by wearing a coat and a pant, that matches, you're automatically going to be more formal than 90% of the other people there. And then she also had a question about sleeve garters, because Keller wears them quite often, as do I. And sleeve garters served a purpose when they started mass producing shirts. They were all made to one sleeve length, and that was usually 38.
Ridiculously long.
Which just means it's ridiculously long. My sleeve length is 35. And so people wear the sleeve garters to, adjust the length of their sleeve. I will wear them because a lot of my vintage suits are made for shorter people. I don't like to alter my vintage too much, so I will wear the sleeve garters to give the illusion that my coat sleeve is the correct length.
Yeah, so that's generally why we wear them so frequently, is just because I do it because I'm lazy to get the right fitting shirt and to alter my coat sleeves, but
It's funny when you wear three pieces all the time, the shirt really becomes an afterthought. Mm-hmm. I personally, full confession, I do not iron my shirts, I just wash them. I don't even bother starching my collars anymore.
You only wear white shirts?
I only wear white shirts. I have a blue one, a very pale blue, just in case I run out of laundry, but no, I only wear white.
I'll wear some stripes. I have one checked shirt, I think. But I'll usually try to keep a white collar at least if I can.
I did wear, the last time I wore that blue shirt was to work. I was at the end of my laundry and I wore a two-piece ensemble with that blue shirt, and everyone kept saying, "Oh wow, you're wearing a blue shirt?"
It was odd.
And it's pale blue, and I just looked and I go, "It just isn't me. It's not my personality. It's too loud."
As for that question though, a business suit can absolutely be a business suit without a waistcoat.
Yes.
Two-piece and three-piece, that's just different kind of styles. Some suits will come with a third piece, the waistcoat, others won't. You can still have pretty much any type of suit with or without a waistcoat until you start going back to the 18th
and
century.
It's a lot of your personal preference. And then the other thing we wanted to talk about that we didn't get to touch upon too is what specifically is a lounge suit. So Keller and I are both wearing lounge suits. They're very different. So his is from about the late 80s, we think. Mine is from the 70s, and they're both lounge suits because of the way that they're cut. And they were called lounge suits because out in public you were either wearing, especially in the 1800s or early 20th century, you wore a frock coat for formal business occasions, and they were double-breasted and long down to your knees. There's some other details we don't have to get into, but this developed as just kind of lounging around. But a lounge suit can be a very formal business suit. The times have changed. The frock coat, no one wears frock coats anymore. Don't wear one. You look like you're
kind of ugly.
They're kind of ugly, and it's you're going to look like a character in a movie. But yeah, that's just kind of the.
So typically lounge suits are more casual, as what we're in today, and they're a lounge suit because of the cut. But usually you'll see them in more natural kind of brown shades because they're more casual, kind of things like that. But anyway, we'll jump into the coat.
So the basics for the coat, like we talked about a little bit in what is a suit. So your coat will come in essentially two varieties. There's single-breasted and double-breasted. And the single-breasted has 1 row of buttons, double-breasted has 2 rows of buttons. So that's the very first thing. But a suit is also going to be made in usually 6 pieces, sometimes 4.
That's the fabric that they cut out the stitch.
But the main thing is talking about the interior, because regardless of what style of coat you're wearing, if it's for a tuxedo, if it's for tails, if it's for morning dress and all, a lounge suit, the construction stays essentially the same. And we have a coat here today that was generously lent to us so that you can actually see the interior of a standard mid-range suit coat. Keller, so if you bring that over, and we can actually start talking about in detail some of these things.
So here we are.
Yeah, so this is now this is an old jacket, probably 10 or 12 years old, and as you can see, the front is completely cut away, and we're going to talk about what all this stuff is on the inside. And so this is the interior. What is all this? So a suit, generally, suit coat is going to be a highly constructed garment. You have some that are less constructed. Anything that has nothing on the inside is not worth your money. Just flat out. It needs to have something going on. Italian jackets, tend to be less. So those are things that you would find, say, at Suit Supply, more or less.
Less structured.
Less structured. They're very Milanese because they still have shoulder padding. And then British and American tailoring or German tailoring tends to have much more structure, not unlike, like my suit has a lot of structure in it. So what are these sorts of things? What you're looking for in a quality suit is what you have here, which is called canvas. And canvas is made out of horsehair, sometimes linen or hemp. There are a few other materials that might be used, but it should be made out of horsehair. And this is how suits were made for about 200 years, and before that they would use a very heavy material called buckram. Essentially it's like burlap. And this is what gives structure and resilience to your garment.
Otherwise it would just be, the thin wool fabric flopping around.
Flopping around, it needs to have this structure. And this is why we're talking about this, because if you don't know how to identify any of this, you're going to wind up buying something very poor quality. So this particular jacket is what you call half canvassed. So the canvassing stops here, whereas on a lot of suits, like my suit here, is a fully canvas suit where the canvas comes all the way down.
Keep going.
You will rarely find fully canvas suits ready to wear at a retailer. You can find them quite easily when you're thrifting for clothes, but otherwise you're going to have them handmade by a tailor.
Or you'd be buying something vintage, like this.
Yeah, and there's a great increase in cost because one of the most costly parts of the suit is this material here, this horsehair. Additionally to that, you can see that a quality suit is canvassed all the way through the lapel in 2 pieces, and the canvassing is anchored with all these little stitches. And it's not too dissimilar to the stitches used for a hem on a pant, because you can't see them on the other side, but they are there.
They're hidden. They're
hidden, and that's going to anchor everything together. You also have what you call batting, which is made of cotton, and this will, just to give a little more fluff to the chest, build out the chest a little bit. And then on all suits, regardless of quality, with the exception of those that are like the totally deconstructed things, there are several layers of material in the shoulder up through here, which help to build out your shoulder line. This is an older jacket where they were still padding it with foam. That's very rare today. Most people will not pad things with foam. It's horrible, and it kind of ruins the jacket. This one here, with the horsehair, what you'll find is that it's going to breathe a lot better as well. So you can wear a very heavy wool suit, and you can actually feel the breeze coming all the way through it.
Yeah.
Once you start getting more familiar with identifying these sorts of things, you will immediately feel the difference on your body between a canvas coat and one that is not canvassed.
Putting on, a $1,000 coat versus a $100 coat, you will feel a difference, and you'll understand how people used to live like this.
Yes.
Because it's functional. I mean, this is a 3-piece flannel suit, and it's hot outside, but I can tolerate it. I probably should have worn a linen one, but for the filming I did this. But
and what I tell people is at a certain point, at a certain temperature, you're always going to be hot. There's really no way to get around it.
Yeah.
But wool will breathe so much that it actually helps, and with wearing a proper shirt and all these things, it actually helps keep you dry, and that really helps with the heat.
And so a lot of these things we're talking about with the cotton here and the canvas, we're saying it makes this structure and this kind of fluff to it. It's all hidden inside the jacket, and unless someone's showing it to you, like, oh, there's this canvas here, there's this cotton here, you don't really notice it. So it's a really subtle but also really, really important detail.
And there are certain identifying factors as well that will enable you to identify whether a garment is canvassed or not, because sometimes you can be charged huge amounts of money for a suit at a department store, $700, $800, $900, and have something of inferior quality. So a suit that is not canvassed is
so let's
what
talk about the alternatives that are of lesser quality.
Yeah, so the main thing of lesser quality, what you will find 90% of the time off the rack, is going to be what you call a fused jacket. A fused jacket is where instead of all of this beautiful horsehair, it's going to have a heavy layer of polyester with glue, and it comes in a big roll like toilet paper and has all these little BBs of glue on it. And when they sew the garment together, they press it
with a lot of heat
and steam, and that glue adheres all the pieces together. But it creates a solid barrier between you and the movement of air through the jacket. That's why cheaper suits will feel hot in the summertime, cold in the wintertime.
Because there's literal plastic inside the jacket.
Exactly.
Right.
And so you want to avoid that. Some vintage items from starting in the 60s through the 70s and 80s, even the 90s, are fused, and it can be hard to tell the difference because the fusing they used was very heavy. So just be aware of that. But in any case, one of the things that you'll find that you can look for, a lapel. So this is the lapel, and where this comes from historically is the frock coat, not the 19th century frock coat, the 18th century frock coat. A little bit different, well, very different garment. And those were the first coats that had a collar, before they didn't have a collar or lapels. And it stood up, kind of like this. And as time went on, the collar became more folded down. And the canvas in here is pad stitched to the rest of the shell fabric.
That's what this is here.
And it's stitched into shape. So they actually have to manipulate it by hand and add all these stitches by hand to give it what you call a lapel roll.
Because this isn't pressed, there's no crease here.
There's no crease here. And
That's
like
one
on
thing
my
you have to be
suit,
careful of.
this
Some
suit
cheaper
has...
suits will be pressed that way, and that's not what you want at all.
No. And you can see like my coat here has a very broad roll in it, because this was, all done by hand. If that suit does not have this sort of bounce where and it comes back, that is a fused suit. You'll feel it's like limp and kind of lifeless because there's nothing in between the layers of fabric to give it that structure. So that's one of the things you can use immediately to identify whether a garment is at least half canvassed. You also feel a great difference in weight, but that comes with experience. Different shell fabrics can kind of mess
And
it
it
up.
can be difficult to tell between a canvas and a fused jacket. Me, and especially Max, he can walk up and just feel here and just know if it's fused or canvas for a lot of jackets. And that's not something that we can really convey to you how to do that. But if you start experiencing, a lot of suits and you get into it and you start paying attention and noting the details, you can learn to just feel and tell, oh, this is canvas, or oh, this is fused. Because obviously not every jacket's going to have a huge chunk cut away like this.
Exactly. And so now that we've, kind of talked about, the canvassing is super, super important because that is the skeleton of the suit. Not unlike the human body, if there's defects in the skeleton, it makes for a pretty awful life. Same thing with a coat. If there are defects in the coat, it makes for a pretty awful coat. But now we can kind of move on to some of the other things. So things like, one of the stands out is the lapel. The lapel doesn't serve any practical purpose anymore. Like I was explaining with the 18th century, the collar stood up, and the coats could conceivably be buttoned all the way to the top.
And some English kind of countryside coats will actually still have buttons here.
They'll have a tab with a button. And an interesting thing to note is if you were to button this all the way up to the top, it makes this little gap, which is reminiscent of what like clerics wear, the cassock, and that's kind of where that came from. But there are several styles of lapel as well. On a suit, a lounge suit or a business suit, there are only 2 acceptable styles of lapel, and it depends on the level of formality.
So what we have here is what we call a notch lapel, and that's what me and Max are wearing. Max and I are wearing.
It's the most common style of lapel, especially on a single-breasted jacket. It is less formal, but there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to worry about, I'm going to this event, I don't have a single-breasted suit with a peak lapel. On a double-breasted suit, though, they are always a peak lapel. The vast majority of my suits are notch, but I do have some that are peak lapel. And the only reason why you might want to consider not just levels of formality, but maybe based on your build, peak lapel can sometimes make your shoulders look broader and your waist more narrow. But those are, the lapels shouldn't be something that makes or breaks a coat for you.
Generally, in my experience, we'll see if Max agrees. If you have no idea how to shop for a suit, and you see one that has a peak lapel, I'd say it's usually of better quality just because you don't see them as much anymore. And usually the people who are still making them have, the knowledge.
It's more difficult to make a peak lapel because the edges have to be micro-pleated into place. And it's usually a conscious decision by the manufacturer that we're gonna do a peak lapel. And so now we've got 2 other examples here. So this is
just a sports coat, and sports coats are very casual compared to even what we're wearing here. And you'll see it still has a notch lapel, just like this. Maybe we'll bring this back and talk about some other features that it has.
Yeah, because it's going to bring up the next few points.
But next here we have a double-breasted 2-piece suit, and you'll see, as always, it has peak lapels. Right,
it has
here.
the peak here. Yeah, and a double-breasted suit always has peak lapels.
And so compare what you see here to what we have here. There's a little notch here, there's the peak coming over right here.
And so that kind of brings our next point to a suit always has a pocket up here. You may find some that don't. That's very unusual. They've had pockets for hundreds of years, so that should be there. But then kind of moving on. So the next feature of a suit is the vents in the back. Almost all suits are vented these days. I have a couple in my wardrobe that have no vents at all. What the point of the vent is to give relief for the coat so that it drapes over a chair properly, or that it helps with easier movement. A double-breasted suit always has either 2 or none. And this is the more formal option to have 2.
Correct. After that, an example of a suit or a coat with 1 vent is going to be sports coats. Now, sports coats kind of came to be for several reasons. One was for, sport, countryside, riding horses. And so the horses is kind of where you get the single vent from. So you can sit on a horse properly.
And that should be, this can be a consideration when you're purchasing a garment and you are thinking about how am I going to use this, where am I going to wear it? Because you don't necessarily want to wear something with a single vent to a very formal occasion.
Right.
My personal definition of what a sport coat is that it must have, if it's a single-breasted sport coat, it must have only 1 vent.
Agreed.
What you'll see a lot of times, sport coats at retailers, they have 2 vents. I would more call that an odd jacket.
I agree. One of the really important features of a sports coat is sport. And historically, that a lot of times would involve horses, horseback riding. And so that single vent here on the back was really important. So historically, I would.
Yeah, and like so, like my suit today, this is like I said, a suit from the 1970s. They were a much sportier decade than most, so I wouldn't wear this for anything formal. But it has a single vent in the back, and it is very, very tall. And what that does is it really helps you to move around and sit comfortably while the coat is buttoned.
Sure, I've got a single vent as well.
Oh, so you do, yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, and then the next thing you are going to be thinking about too are things like your pockets. So most single-breasted suits have pocket flaps, and the pocket flap goes all the way back to the 18th century.
The very beginning.
The very beginning, and it's so that debris doesn't fall into your pocket while you're wearing it, because as we mentioned in our in episode 3, the coat came from the peasantry, where they're wearing it to do hard labor, and you don't want debris falling in. You'll see on a double-breasted suit, they will have what are called jetted pockets, but they do not have a pocket flap. But what you kind of in the next, or like in this sport coat that you just had, this tweed one, this one has
it's quite common to see patch pockets. Right here.
Yeah, and a patch pocket is very casual. So this is something that you're going to wear.
You can see how it's sewn on. It's just a patch of fabric right here.
On the top. And there's some different variations of it, but that's very, very casual. But then the next level from the suit is going to be a tuxedo. And so Keller has a very special tuxedo here that I've appraised at being most likely from World War II.
Almost certainly.
There are certain things, we won't get into it today, but the tuxedo is going to be the next.
And so where it differs from these other coats, first thing you'll notice is the lapel. Now tuxedos have only, just like the suit, there's only 2 acceptable lapel types.
Yep.
And that's going to be the peak lapel, which is what you see on double-breasted
because it's
suits.
more formal.
It's more formal. Or the shawl collar. This coat doesn't even have a lapel because it just wraps around with the collar.
Yeah.
And so that's also perfectly acceptable for a tuxedo.
It's a little more casual, but it's some easier styling as well. So if you're planning on purchasing a black tie ensemble for a particular event, say if it's for a cocktail party or a gala, you can wear a shawl collar for that, something where dinner is being served. But for ceremonies, weddings, and the like, it really should be a peak lapel.
Now you'll notice that...
well, for one...
Oh, yeah.
This has jetted pockets, so there's no, on a tuxedo, they're commonly manufactured with pocket flaps these days. There shouldn't be a pocket flap on your tuxedo, and there's a good reason why, because like I said, it's for keeping debris out of your pockets. But when you're in an evening setting, having dinner or at a ceremony,
there should be no debris.
There should be no debris falling into your pockets, and so it's really unnecessary. If your tuxedo has pocket flaps, try to tuck them in. And have them obscured or have a tailor remove them.
You'll also see one thing that a lot of people don't know is the color. There's also only 2 acceptable colors for a tuxedo.
Yeah.
There's black and there's midnight blue. This one is midnight blue.
On camera, it will almost certainly appear black, but it's a very, very dark blue.
And what do they say, Max?
What do they say?
Midnight blue is blacker than black.
Oh, midnight blue is blacker than black. Yeah, so the midnight blue came about as a color with the invention of electric lighting, because there was no true black dye in those days. Black was either usually a very dark red or a very dark green, and under electric lighting it would really pick up on the red or the green. And so they put it in this midnight blue because it looks blacker than black.
Right. And so a lot of people will want a white tuxedo or something, and in that case you're going to want to look at a dinner jacket, which is a little bit different. Still the same formality.
A dinner jacket is like a sport coat for tuxedos, and if they're even a little more elaborate, you'll see some that are silk or brocaded, or they'll have these really wild patterns. Those are more like smoking jackets. That's not for any kind of public event.
Right.
That's just for maybe you're at home with a few friends and you're just gonna have some drinks and talk.
It's not ceremonial.
Right. Don't make a fool out of yourself and I'm serious, by going to things like an opera or the theater wearing one of these loud, outlandish jackets. It's really garish. The tuxedo is so simple because it's supposed to, the emphasis is on the cut, right? And that's what makes you look good, is the cut, not the material it's made out of.
Yeah, and so the simplicity and almost sort of somberness is really important for the tuxedo.
It also, this one being from the 1940s, also is ventless, and there's a good reason to have a ventless tuxedo. It doesn't drape as well over a chair, but the thought is that most of the time actually for these events you're going to be standing and talking to people, and it keeps your profile looking sleek and clean. There won't be any awkwardness where the vent opens up and I can see a little bit of your shirt poking out.
Yeah.
Or, if you're wearing a cummerbund, I can see the buckle or the strap for the adjustments in the back. You want all that to be concealed.
And so one thing that we've both noticed in our sort of suit, menswear retail kind of thing, is it's kind of tricky to find a proper tuxedo nowadays. In a lot of the places we've worked, you'll see them with notched lapels, which is
totally wrong.
Makes me want to throw up, to be honest. Please don't buy a notched lapel tuxedo. You'll see them with the flat pockets, which is just wrong. And you'll see them with events, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but...
The only reason why a lot of manufacturers do that is because they can cut it from the same pattern as their every other suit. It shows a cheapness.
And it's also an excuse to compromise the actual cut of the jacket and say, oh, if you're a bigger person, that's what the vents are for, so it can drape over you easier.
Right.
Instead of...
Well, the tuxedo, I always recommend, unless you're really in a pinch and you haven't had any plans, or you've procrastinated, or something was surprised upon you, just rent one, honestly, because otherwise you need to have the tuxedo made. It needs to either be made to measure, and we'll talk about made to measure versus bespoke another time, but it has to be made.
And the last thing with the, tuxedo ensemble, the collar, in this case, or the lapel, if it is a peak lapel, is made out of satin, and that will be matched on the galon, the stripe of the trouser.
Yeah.
Right here.
A tuxedo should have this. There are people who say, "Oh, I don't like the stripe." Too bad.
You have to.
You have to have that.
And the last place that you'll see the satin, which curiously is not featured on this jacket, should be over the buttons. This should be covered in satin, but as Max pointed out, this jacket is almost certainly from World War II, which featured fabric rations. So that's
right,
probably why.
And so because in World War II they used silk to make parachutes and also to make wound dressings because it doesn't stick to the wound. Now the amount of satin that would be used on these buttons is literally nothing. They could have easily cut it from the wastage, but it was intended to show visibly that I am contributing to the war effort. And so on these jackets you will not see satin on them. World War II is also a period where the double-breasted tuxedo becomes very popular because double-breasted suits were popular.
Right.
The theory was that it took less wastage. It took more wastage to make a waistcoat than to just cut a bigger double-breasted jacket.
Right.
And so to this day, double-breasted tuxedos don't have satin-covered buttons traditionally because
that's from the 40s.
That's they were born in that era. But and then probably the only other thing I want to mention with a coat, so you'll notice that on most coats there is a little buttonhole up here. And that's in order to attach, in case you do have an extra button up here, but like I said, that's really only in England, or to have like a lapel pin. Don't put your lapel pin in the middle of the lapel. Ooh. But it's a good indication of a mark quality on a coat. So when you're shopping for a coat, you'll notice that the buttonholes down here are differently shaped. These are called purled buttons because it has a little round part like a pearl. And that's in order to grip onto the shank of the button. This one, however, is completely straight. If the buttonholes are made by hand, wonderful. But oftentimes they are applied by machine. If the buttonhole up here is the same shape as the purled buttonhole down here, that is a mark of cheapness. The machines that they use to apply these are very, very expensive. And you have to have two separate machines to apply these two buttonholes. So if this one is different, that is a mark of quality because they have a separate machine.
Or it's done by hand.
Or it is sewn by
Preferably.
hand. Well, if it's sewn by hand, you will see the difference on the price tag for sure. You'll feel that. But
And we're gonna get more into the like different types of buttons and machines and things like that when we get into made to measure versus bespoke.
exactly.
Because even just with buttons or horn buttons or all these things.
Right. So the big takeaways from about coats. So the coat, of course, is a highly structured garment, and you want to have something with canvassing on the inside. There will be occasions, probably when we're doing showcases for particular vintage, where we can talk about more of the differences in cut, but you want that canvassing in there. How do we identify it? By looking for that lapel roll. If that's not there, or if that lapel feels really particularly flimsy, then you'll have a fused jacket that has that layer of glue in there, and you don't want that. Because also they're not as durable. I've had some of my canvas suits, all my suits are canvas, but where I used to keep my cell phone in here and I actually tore the stitching on the canvas, and my tailor was able to go inside and repair it. A fused jacket cannot be repaired. And you'll often see when people leave their suits in a hot car for too long.
It's like rubber soles.
It's like rubber soles. It's toast. They leave their suit in a hot car, or they take it to the dry cleaner. And we'll do a whole thing about why you shouldn't dry clean your clothes. But that glue will start to break down, and you'll start getting this bubbling. Once that happens,
It's done.
it's done. There's no way to fix that.
One general thing, we would strongly encourage always natural material everywhere in the entire suit. If there's polyester in it, try to avoid it. If there's fusing in it, try to avoid it. And it shouldn't be the make or break of it. If there's a coat you found online for really cheap and it'll fit you, and it's made with a little bit of polyester, that's okay. I've got a few upstairs.
Right, and a lot of my suits are half canvas, where from basically the middle of the buttons down is going to be fused with that polyester material. But by the time it's down here, it's not in so much direct contact with your body that it's going to be...
It's not as vital.
It's not as vital. And a fully canvas suit is very heavy. Like that tweed one that you were wearing.
Right.
I've worn that coat from time to time, and your shoulders are tired by the end of the day because it's so heavy. But
It's like 6 pounds.
the natural material is super important. It can be linen, cotton, wool, and silk. Wool will always be the premier
It's the
fabric.
most common, probably the most versatile as well. Until you get into like the summer season, in which case linen might kind of take.
And I'm wearing a linen waistcoat today, because it just rained last night and it's very humid, and I just want to have a little more breathability. But we'll do a whole, just like we're going to be doing a whole series on each individual piece of the suit. We're going to do a whole series on each kind of textile, on the natural materials, because now polyester it has come a long way since say the 70s. Where the materials they were manufacturing are almost like a plastic sheet. They're very, very stiff and stifling. But polyester is very bad for the environment. It sheds, so clothes make dust. I would rather have wool dust or little
and plastic shards.
than micro and nanoplastics that will come off of your polyester garments.
So the big takeaway is look for natural materials everywhere, but even on the inside with the horsehair canvas, right? And so, try that if you can, feel for that, and, it's not like you're going to immediately, after watching this, be able to just go tell. But,
and sometimes certain brands, they're marketed as a half canvas when they are not truly half canvas. A notable one would be like a Hickey Freeman is a really popular brand with certain gentlemen. and the claim is that it's half canvas.
Eighth canvas.
It's like eighth canvas. The canvas starts up here and it stops down where the first button is, and it scoops. It's not actually truly half canvas. It's just to give the illusion, and that's very cheap.
And so, like to summarize here, we'll kind of slowly wrap it up. Look for natural materials. We talked about, the canvas on the inside of the coat. Try to avoid fusing. We talked a little bit about the differences of different types of coats. Sports coat, which was made for sports, outdoors, kind of country activities, and that features one vent for horseback riding. And again, Max said, consider what you're buying this coat for. If you ride a motorcycle, consider a single vent. It's basically a horse on wheels, right?
Yeah, well, there's nothing. I mean, that'd be cool, riding a motorcycle in a suit.
Yeah, I went snowboarding on in a suit. I'll put a picture here. It was fun, and it worked. It was functional. So yeah, talk about tuxedo and how the lapels have to be different than most of your suits that me and Max are wearing today. Usually ventless or double vented, if at all. Jetted pockets. We talked about all those things. A lounge suit versus a business suit.
Yeah, and then dinner suit, which is a tuxedo, and then tails, and there are some other categories, but they're kind of irrelevant in the United States. We'll hit them eventually. And I think our next, what I would expect for our next episodes is we're going to be next talking about trousers, which is highly controversial. We're going to be talking about full cut versus slim fit, where the pant needs to hit you, and all these sorts of things. And then the waistcoat, and then we'll kind of put a crown on that series by talking about how to fit yourself for a coat properly. Before you run out and start trying to buy stuff, you need to know, does this actually fit me?
Right.
How do I fit myself for
We'll do a little grand finale and talk about fitting all of these things. And
we'll eventually then go on to talk about the materials and all of that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the actual different cuts of the suit. There's like Italian cuts. There's the internet famous English drape cut. So we'll get to all those. We'll talk about all those things. As always, if there's any questions, drop them down below or wherever you're watching this. I don't know where you comment. Maybe over here. And we'll answer them in a comment, and we'll also talk about it at the beginning of the next episode or wherever we see it.
And please like and subscribe. We're trying to post once a week, and just to have a nice, relaxing discussion about classical menswear. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. If you know anyone who might find this interesting, give it a share. We would appreciate that perhaps the most. So thank you very much for watching. This has been episode 4. I hope you enjoyed my haircut. It's a long time coming.
It looks much better.
There's one more episode we're going to upload before this one comes out, but I'm excited for this one to finally be out there. It shows my haircut. But thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
We'll be back soon with some trousers.
Farewell.
Au revoir.